DW Africa Link.
Amid rising tensions in the Horn of Africa, Turkey has stepped in to broker a deal in one of the region's most complex disputes, the feud between Somalia and Ethiopia. Will Erdogan's diplomatic efforts pave the way for peace, or are we looking at yet another stalemate between the two neighbors? Today, we unravel the intricate dynamics of this deal and explore whether it holds the key to resolving the tensions between these two nations. Stay tuned. My name is Josey Mahachi. Welcome to Africa Link, the podcast that connects you to the stories that matter from Africa.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
Ethiopia and Somalia have reached a deal to end a nearly year-old bitter dispute following talks brokered by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The two East African neighbors have been at loggerheads since landlocked Ethiopia made a deal with Somalia's breakaway region, Somaliland, to have access to the sea. The move sparked a diplomatic and military row, with Somalia saying the alleged deal was a violation of its sovereignty. The escalating tensions led to international concern over the risk of renewed conflict in the Horn of Africa region. So, can the deal mediated by Turkey calm nerves of the bitter rivals? Let's dig deeper into this with Dr. Martin Oloo, an advocate of the High Court who holds a doctorate on strategic leadership and land administration. And also joining us is our in-house analyst and journalist, DW's Isaac Mugabi. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us here on DW Africa Link podcast. Now, I just want to start with you, Isaac. You are our in-house analyst, also my colleague, journalist. We've been covering this story for months now. And what do you make of this? And also just to make our listeners understand exactly the root cause of this problem between the two countries.
Thank you, Josey, so much. And I will talk about it from the perspective of speaking to people on the ground. And it's a story that I've covered extensively, speaking to people in Ethiopia, in Somaliland, and in Somalia itself. For me, I think this is a positive development. Look, we have so many crises in the Horn of Africa, leave alone Africa in general, leave alone the whole world. And I think Erdogan stepping in at this time, it's something that we are not supposed to take lightly. Why? I mean, positively on that note. I know there's so many international players who are kind of trying to have a power struggle within the region, who want to have a bigger say in the region because of vested interests. Now, look, when we go back to the deal that Somaliland had with Ethiopia, of course, it rubbed so many people the wrong way, especially Somalia. Even though we had international players like the UK silently endorsing it, and also some countries within the EU thinking that this is the right way to go. But again, Somalia, that has had its own internal troubles, leave alone the internal infightings, they were not happy. For me, it's a step forward. When you bring two warring parties together, personally, I think it shouldn't be the me or the person has done it, but rather, is there going to be peace? Let's start from there.
Right.
If the two can really reconcile the differences, if the two can really sit together at the same table, and if you look at the picture of Erdogan in between Ethiopia's prime minister and Somalia's prime minister, it spoke volumes. And in a way that transcends the body language, in a way that actually you say, this is where the future lies, where people can sit together and iron out the differences and be able to speak to each other and say, look, you're making a deal that I don't want with someone who's supposed to be part of me. I'm talking about Somalia and Somaliland.
Right. Now, to you, Dr. Oloo, what is your take on the Turkey brokered deal between Ethiopia and Somalia, having listened to what my colleague Isaac just also unpacked?
I believe, and I agree again with what Isaac has said, that this is a positive move. Positive because we do not want neighboring countries to be at war with each other. Positive because there is a mutual benefit to both Ethiopia and Somalia. Positive because there is, I'm sure, an agreement between the two countries, perhaps on Somaliland, because the quarrel here is on Ethiopia approaching Somaliland. And the Federal Republic, remember to say that, the Federal Republic of Somalia feeling like this is spiting. This is a bit of intrusion, and it's against international conventions for a country to acknowledge a breakaway country when the other part of that country is saying that this is part of it. So there is quite a bit here, international, diplomatic, and also from a public international law. There is every positive things to be said, to be gained when neighbors seem to get together and seem to have an agreement. That said, it's about economic interests. Mm-hmm. Why is Ethiopia interested in doing a deal with Somaliland, or indeed doing a deal with Somalia? It's because they want to have access to the port. And that is a way in which they are seeking to make sure that they have opportunities. It's about the water that they must access. Why is the water important? Because it's about water that Ethiopia and Egypt are also having a problem. Mm-hmm. So that is River Nile, and this is the Indian Ocean. So what Ethiopia is saying, that we will access River Nile and use it for dam, for agriculture, for hydro, electric production, and so on. But we'll also, for business purposes, access the Indian Ocean. So Ethiopia is saying, look, we will do a deal with whoever gives us the opportunity to prosper, to grow our business interests, and to get access to a port where our goods can come through, and we can also deal with others. So positive development, and it's a good deal for both countries. Not sure how Somaliland reacts after this, but that's another story.
Right. But when I'm listening to you, it looks like one will benefit more than the other. Who stands to benefit the most from this agreement, Martin?
It is Ethiopia. Ethiopia needs access to the port. Ethiopia needs peace with Somalia. Remember, Ethiopia has been part of the peace building in Somalia. And so to that extent, Somalia has also recognized the fact that Ethiopia has been a part of the peace building. So there is both. But again, for Ethiopia, once they gain the port and they have access, that will benefit them the more.
And Isaac, now you heard what Martin just said, that Somaliland has not responded to this. We are all waiting. Somaliland was not represented in the talks. How do you think, Isaac, they would respond to this deal?
First of all, I will agree with what Dr. Oloo just mentioned. And to answer your question, everyone is watching. I'm talking about Somaliland. I'm talking about Eritrea. Somaliland, being them, they always play the card of being the diplomats of the region. To an extent, Somaliland will not come out explicitly to say that we don't want this deal. They can say, I hope the deal that Ethiopia is signing with Turkey doesn't compromise what we signed before with you, big brother Ethiopia. Secondly, the deal that Ethiopia and Turkey have signed, of course, we are not privy to the details of it, but it doesn't exclusively leave out Somaliland. Look, just like Oloo said, everyone has economic interests into this. And Somaliland, it gave the leeway to Ethiopia to say, you can access 20 kilometers of the coast, which rubbed so many people the wrong way, like I said before. It doesn't mean that Ethiopia is going to rubbish or to bin that deal that it has with Somaliland. No. But rather, I'm sure that there are some provisions that don't leave out Somaliland's interest. And why am I saying this? When Ethiopia went into this deal before it came into the limelight with Turkey, with Ankara, they had to make sure that one of the big brothers in the Horn of Africa, Isaac Mugabi, the president of Eritrea, is in the know. because we have to remember the battles and the wars that were fought between Eritrea and Ethiopia back in the until Eritrea got its independence, until it took back that port that Ethiopia had. So meaning that now, if Turkey is now the picture of things, then it doesn't have to exclude anyone in the Horn of Africa, including Djibouti. And this is the big question where the rest of international players have to find a footing into where they have to belong, whether they will align themselves with Ethiopia, or they might even use the back door through Kenya, through Ruto. And they say, you know what? Can you find a way so that we find ourselves in that deal that Ethiopia has signed with Turkey? That is one. Secondly, other international players like the EU themselves, specifically Germany, are also going to find themselves wanting to know the nitty-gritty of that deal. And I can tell you this without fear of contradiction, that this is a deal that Ethiopia, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia and Erdogan are going to keep under wraps. And if they're to share some nitty-gritty, they'll just give them the subsets of it, but not like saying this is what we agreed on, because everyone knows what they want.
Now to you, Martin. Yeah, so I just wanted to find out if you want to add anything from what Isaac has said, especially more on what happens to that deal now between Ethiopia and Somaliland. Do you think it is dead now?
I think that is the secret of public international relations, that I can be with you and we are friends, but I can also be with your enemy and we are friends. And between me and you and your enemy, there are things that we could be in agreement around. So you play up your diplomatic cards in such a way that you don't make permanent enemies, you just make friends. That your friend does not have to be my enemy, and your enemy does not have to be my enemy as well. So there is a way in which I believe, and I agree with Isaac, that the way Ethiopia is playing this is to maximize gain. Remember that, and he has again said it, Ethiopia has had long protracted war with Eritrea on account of a port. Now, Ethiopia has been interested around Somalia. That's why they have participated in peace building, because of the port. When that was not opening and Somaliland was offering it, again, because of the port, Ethiopia has been interested. But above all, Ethiopia has its own interests. And in pursuit of that interest, it will make a deal with anybody who cares to make a deal with them.
But one would just wonder, I mean, you mentioning that it could have been possible that Ethiopia makes a deal with Eritrea. Then why doesn't Ethiopia seek sea access via Eritrea, which is more common with Ethiopia rather than Somalia?
Now that is where I mean, because the war between Eritrea and Ethiopia is a tribal war that rapprochement is not anything closer. Afwerki is still a permanent feature in Eritrea, and I don't think that he's about to cave in with the Tigray issues and so on. So that is a harder route to take. It's like trying to pump water up a hill. Why pump water up a hill when you have an option to pump it down a valley? So they are choosing a path that is less paved with mines and less paved with thorns, and a path that's likely to be successful. You know, the one with Ethiopia has been a difficult one.
Right. I think, Isaac, you definitely want to add something to that.
Definitely. On the surface, your question may sound to be soft, but it's a hard question. It's just like trying to separate two twins. Now, to add on what Martin Oloo said, of course, Ethiopia knows very well that it could have spoken to Eritrea. If you do remember, in 2016, there were conversations between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and later on that culminated into a Afwerki meeting with the Prime Minister of Ethiopia before the Oromo and the Tigray, conflict came in. And that picture, when they crossed borders, spoke volumes. So these are two brothers that you cannot separate. And now they're looking for a third way, whereby if I have issues with my background, I can use yours, but before that, let us try to look for a third option also. And that's why they need Somaliland. But maybe, as an outsider into this, so many people are saying, also including me, they would have wished that also Somalia is privy to the deal between Somaliland and Ethiopia, which Ethiopia doesn't want to divulge. of course, with vested interests. And just like Martin Oloo said, I mean, look, the bottom line of everything is economic interests. As we speak now, in the world that we live in, there's been so much talk at the level of international politics, and relations, saying, look, we have to, people being like peace emissaries. That is the past tense. That is in the past. At the moment, everyone must have do for their interests. There's no longer manna from heaven that comes and says, oh, hallelujah, here you are, it's goodwill. No way, no way. And in the coming days, I can predict this. Somalia is going to be more vocal, and maybe we're going to see a kind of reawakening of Somaliland, but where Somaliland is going to come in, we'll seek recognition. We'll say, I want to feature prominently into this deal so that other countries, so that the whole world recognizes me. For some of us who have traveled in Somaliland, they have a semblance of kind of peace and the rule of law. You can imagine a situation like Friday, they're in the mosque, but the money changers leave their money there and they go, and no one will touch it. So they will capitalize on all these values that shape the society to bring it back onto the table and say, look, your deal, I have to feature prominently, and I want recognition, because of also their interests. And remember, the deal of Turkey that was signed and Ethiopia doesn't rubbish away the deal that Ethiopia had with Somaliland, even though we are not privy to the details of it. Mm-hmm. The way the world now is, you cannot take over my deal because you're signing it with Martin Oloo. No way. But someone can say, we shall try to find a way of accommodating Isaac in our own ways without making Oloo even know. And what you talk with me, Oloo will not know. And what you talk with Oloo, Isaac will not know.
Right. Oh, wow. Interesting. Now, Martin, another country that we should not ignore or not mention is Egypt in this whole equation, which also has some tensions with Ethiopia. It's been ramping up military support to Somalia. How likely is it that a similar deal could be struck between Egypt and Ethiopia?
Actually, that is a very important question. And again, both Egypt and Ethiopia are looking at their internal national interests. For Egypt, River Nile is key. It is a livelihood. You touch it, they are on you. For Ethiopia, River Nile is an opportunity. You dam it, you have such a big source for water for other uses, including irrigation and so on. So both countries need each other. Both countries benefit from the River Nile. So they have no option but to realize that they either survive together or collapse together, because they cannot afford to fight. They cannot afford to be in a place where they are not speaking to each other. Absolutely not. So we have to see the opportunity that once Ethiopia, and by the way, once Ethiopia has had this access, it means that its own economic opportunities get boosted. Will they want to talk with Egypt, or will Egypt be interested in them? Absolutely. Being neighbors and being close, they have more to gain than what can actually affect their relationship. So they would rather be working on what brings harmony, what brings diplomatic peace, as opposed to what brings about insecurity and so on. Because you see, Egypt was reaching out to the other side because it was important for those guys not to compromise, not to agree with Ethiopia. Now that they have agreed, Egypt will have to think again. Instead of looking at that as a problem, it will say, look, now that we are all together on this, can we also agree? So Egypt will say, can we also have a deal with you guys that you will not affect us in the manner in which you are intending to affect us with that damn business or project in Ethiopia?
I see a lot happening in this region. I mean, in the next few days, in the next coming days or months. But Isaac, I see you're also nodding. You want to add something on this Egypt?
Yes, definitely. I mean, one of the key players, not only in the Horn of Africa, but also along the Nile Basin, Egypt, like Martin has been saying, it is so very particular when it comes to touching the Nile. And this has been a bone of contention for so many countries. There are some countries who think it's by divine authority it belongs to them. There are countries like Egypt who think that the Nile, basing on an agreement they signed in 1920 with the British, still stands. And there are countries also in the region, in the East African community, I'm talking about Uganda, Kenya, that are very, very important in the geopolitics, not only within Somalia as an entity when it comes to security, but also in the Nile Basin. And they're watching. No one is blind about this. If I may take you back a little bit when Erdogan, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, effectively demolished the Gulen movement in the whole of Africa after the attempted coup. He succeeded into that, not only in Africa, but also elsewhere in Europe. So when he comes in, these are things that are going to get interesting. Before we knew of the US being the big brother of the region. But after that episode, 1993, it kind of pulled out under Bill Clinton. He was the president. And they came back silently, but the boots on the ground were loud, even though physically they were silent. But the boots could be heard, if you get that analogy I'm trying to use. Now, Turkey is going to be the major key player in the whole of Africa, especially when the Trump administration comes in. And where does this leave other leaders in the region? You are going to see a situation where they're visiting each other to enhance bilateral relations, but behind the scene, when they're saying, oh, the deal you signed with Turkey, I hope my interests are also covered. It's called tete-a-tete. When two leaders said they met behind closed doors, where the microphones are not there, or even when they're there, they are muted. Know that there's a lot of business going on there.
Right.
And also don't forget that in a region where there's so much conflict, when the guns go silent, some people are out of business. They have to create a situation where
some people are making money from the conflict, yeah?
Exactly. If the gun makers, the lobbyists, they see peace prevailing, they won't like that. They will have to make sure that let us create a situation whereby also we have to go on so that we push our interests, Josey.
Now, as we wrap up our discussion, very interesting discussion and powerful, Anna, this is happening here. Martin, to you, let's talk about the regional players. Where does this leave them? We're talking of IGAD, the EAC.
You know, there's something that Isaac was saying, which is an important issue to look at. What is Trump's second term portending for this region and for Europe? Remember that Trump is going to disrupt Europe. He's not interested in NATO. He's not interested in any the conventional Europe that we know it. So the likes of Turkey, and he has this love for dictators and love for people who do not necessarily play conventional politics. So Turkey, as Isaac is saying, is likely to come into this conversation, just like he has time for people like Orban and others. So there's going to be a different set of interests that are going to play in the geopolitics that certainly Africa will feel bits of it. So when you ask me about the regional blocs, the IGAD, AU, and the East African community and so on, the truth is that these blocs have not risen to the occasion. These blocs are still more of, brotherly, camaraderie type of conclaves or meetings, forums for these big guys to just have a good time. We have not seen the effect of these blocs in either their diplomatic, military, or economic intervention. And with that alone, it then behoves Ethiopia to go outside the region, get Turkey to come and help them. Agree with Somalia. That's an indictment of IGAD. It's an indictment of AU. Because it's like saying, we may be brothers. We might even be hosting AU here, but we will go outside to find help. And remember, Turkey is actually also placing itself in a very, very strategic way, both in terms of mercantilism, the mercantile business, and in terms of economic powerhouse. Even when you look at what it's trying to do, this airline within this region and so on, there's a sense of penetration that Turkey is actually gaining.
Professor Martin Oloo, an advocate of the High Court and a teacher of law, also DW's Isaac Mugabi, many thanks for joining us.
Get the stories that are shaping the continent here on Africa Link.
At the Africa Link podcast, we always look across the continent to see how the stories and issues we are dealing with play out or at times even overlap. Turkey has increasingly positioned itself as a mediator in African conflicts, leveraging its growing political and economic ties across the continent. Its recent efforts to mediate disputes such as the Somaliland feud between Somalia and Ethiopia highlight its ambition to be a stabilizing force in the region. Proponents argue that Turkey's balanced approach, infrastructure investments, and historical connections make it a credible intermediary. Critics, however, caution that Turkey's involvement may be driven by strategic interests such as securing trade routes and geopolitical influence rather than purely fostering peace. Should Turkey play a bigger role in mediating African conflicts? That's it for this edition of Africa Link. You are not just a listener, but a part of our huge community, and your engagement can shape the direction of our discussions. We value your insights and encourage you to share your thoughts with us. Remember to follow so you can catch all of the Africa Link podcast episodes. This podcast was co-produced and edited by Crispin Mwakideo. My name is Josey Mahachi. Thanks for listening. Until the next one, it's goodbye for now.